So you need some white paste. This is the flower that we're going to do. So we'll start off with the petals. For the petals you need this set of cutters. These do come in different sizes, so that you can do anything up to a large life-size one. A lot of cutters do that, particularly the firms that I deal with, which is Framar cutters, but Tinkertech cutters also do the same cutters if you can't get Framar. So I'm going to start off with some white paste, and like before, a little bit of fat on your board. This is so that the paste sticks to the board and stays on it. Roll out your paste. Now I'm going to show you a different method for doing ridges. In the last video I showed you with the ridge, other side of this board with the ridge board. But this is another tool that I have, which is called a vein tool, which does your central ridge, a ridge tool. And I start at the bottom and roll it in one direction. Now when you get used to putting your wires in your paste, this is a handy tool to do, because when you get faster at doing it, you can cut out an awful lot of petals or leaves or whatever else you're cutting out at the same time. So I'm just going to do one of each of the petals. So I'm going to do a wide one and a narrow one, because I've already got all my bits and pieces all ready to put together to save time you watching me do all the different pieces. So pull your paste away. And then get that off the board, and like we did with leaves, place it on your first finger with your thumb on top, so you can feel the wire go down the petal. And you want to get it as far up the petal as you can, because if for any reason you break it, it's a lot easier to repair if it's on the wire. Okay? So again, with the narrow petal, twist your wire into the bottom so the Semtex doesn't come off the wire. Feel it go up your wire just a little bit at a time. Take your time doing it, don't rush it. There we are. Then we go to your pad to thin your edges. I'm going to try and not disappear out of shot like I did in the last video, because I've got a bit more used to it now. So thin your edges, your petals, half on and half off, right on the very edge. And then I'm going to turn the petal over, and I'm going to use a different tool to what I used before, and I'm using something is referred to in books as called a Dresden tool, which is this one, which is like two pointed ends. One is wider than the other, from P&E. Don't buy the cheap ones because they come apart. So lay that on your finger, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a central vein up the centre of the petal like that. Bring it up closer to the camera. Straight up the petal like that. Doesn't matter whether you go from top to bottom or whichever way. And get your petal, get it on your first finger with your thumb on top, and bend the wire. Don't try and bend the petal. And again with that one, pull the wire down like that so you've got a curve on it. And then just shape your petals, and then that goes onto your foam like that, onto the foam. Okay, now then the other thing that we need are stamens, and I make my own stamens for lilies. You can buy bought ones, but this is one that I've made. And how I've made that is I've used a very thin wire. I've used a 32 gauge wire for that. Sorry, 32 gauge wire. I'll get it right in a bit. Sorry, I'm fumbling a bit here. And I've used a white wire for the simple reason that I'm going to colour it from scratch. So in order to do this, I mean, it depends on how confident you are with it. To start off with, you could just cut them into 4, but you could actually cut them into 6. You would get away with that. But you need 6 for the flower. I'm just going to cut this into 4 just so I can show you what I'm doing. We don't really use these wires for much else other than making stamens, because they're very, very thin of these. As you can see, they're very bendy, but it doesn't matter so much about these being a bit bent because we're going to bend it anyway. Right, so I'll just move those out of the way. I'm only going to make one stamen here just to show you how it's done. So there's your wire. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, just see if I can zoom in on this so you can see what I'm doing. There we are, that's better. So what I'm going to do is, with this, you've got this little piece on the top there. I'm going to bend it one way like that, and then I'm going to get hold of it about 2/3 of the way down and bend it back the other way like that. So you've got this sort of like a T-bar like that, and then we need to squash that together at that end. So you've got your T, and then what I'm going to do is, I haven't done this before, this is something that I did the other day when I was doing my bits and pieces. I'm going to try and curve it round a little bit, because if you look at a lily petal, they're not, the stamen, they're not straight, there's got a slight curve on them. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, I'm going to come onto my glue that we use for putting everything together, take the brush out, and I'm going to pop the end of the stamen into the glue. Then here I've got some Tylo powder. You can use tragacanth, but Tylo powder is an artificial version which is slightly cheaper. So into your powder, tap it off, back into your glue, back into your powder, and that builds up a base ready for your stamen. I'm going to do this all in one go. Normally I would let that dry before I do the next stage, and the next stage is I've made some pollen here, and all this is ground rice or semolina or anything fine like that in a powder form. Put it into a little bottle or jar or whatever, put the colour, powder colour that you want to use for that particular project into the jar or pot that you're using, and then give it a good shake. In this case I've used a brown powder to get a brown pollen, because that's the colour of the pollen on a lily. So back into your glue and then into your pollen like that. Give it a shake off, and there we have your stamen. So set that to one side to dry. Now the next part of the lily is the central part, the column, which is the part that everything else that you're going to do now is going to fit round when you put the flower together. So I'm going to start off here. I've got a 20 gauge wire, which is the wire that you use for doing your roses. And again, I want some white paste. I'm going to put that away now because I've finished with that for the time being. Just put a little bit more on there just in case I need it. Right, so I'm going to start off by rolling a sausage of paste. That's too big, so I'm going to cut that in half now, because this is going to be very thin. So what we're aiming to do is to do this, which is your central column. So you've got 3 parts to your column. You've got the main column, you've got the ovary, which is the part at the bottom there, and then you've got the anther cap, which is the top part there. So, sausage of paste. Depending on which paste you're using, I will put some glue on your wire. This is quite sticky, as this paste that I'm using, which is a Squire's Kitchen one, so it will stick to this, but if you're using Renshaw's or any of the other flour paste, I will put some glue on your wire. Wire up the centre of it so the wire comes out of the end onto the palm of your hand and roll. And keep rolling and rolling and rolling until you get it as thin as you want it to be. And because it's quite a small lily, you don't want a thick centre, you want a very slim centre. It doesn't matter how much far down the wire you're going to go, because we're going to take off any excess when we've got it as thin as we want it to be. I'll just take that off because that's getting in the way. Keep rolling. You only want to be slightly thicker than the wire itself, really, when you're doing this. Right, I'm going to take some off of there, but I'm going to leave a little bit on the end, which will come obvious in a minute because we need to make the anther cap. Right, so the next thing to do is to get your cutter, put that into your cutter, and you want to leave about that amount at the top. Just press down on your cutter and that leaves you with a mark at the base there. So where that mark is, just get your nails in and just take all that excess off. Thin it down at the bottom and just even up your column to make sure that it's all even the way around. We don't want a bumpy column. Between your finger and your thumb, get the top part with a piece of loose paste on it, like that, and then just press that down. We want to form a flat cap on the top here for that, and just roll it round so you've got a nice cap there, like that. Okay. Right, the next stage is to get hold of a pair of tweezers. Now if you can get curved tweezers, they're better. I couldn't find my curved tweezers, they are difficult to find. Not here, but in shops. So I'm going to use some straight ones, which you'll be able to get from any chemist or anything like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to separate the top part into three, so nip 3 portions into the top of the anther cap, like that. Okay, so you need tweezers in, squeeze to get your anther cap. Right, so I'm just going to lay that down for a second. I'm just going to take a little bit of the excess paste that we've got left here, and I'm going to roll that into a small ball, like that. And you glue again, and we're going to put some glue just at the base there because we want that to stick on. Wire into your ball of paste, twist it in, bring the ball of paste up to the base of your column, and then roll it between your two fingers like that up onto your column. You might, if you get too much glue on, you might find it gets a bit sticky, that, so just be careful. And then again at the base of the oval, but we can readjust this when we've done this. Now then we're going on to another tool which we use an awful lot in flower making, which is the cutting wheel. Two ends, large wheel, small wheel. Don't be fooled by those with the thick wheels on and the different design wheels. That's a totally different tool. In the cheap sets they don't do these. You'll have to buy a PME one, and I keep saying to people there's no point in buying cheap tools because they fall apart. It's false economy. You're better off getting a tool that you can use over and over and again for years, like these that I've got. Some of the tools I've got over 30 years anyway, so that just shows how long they last. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to divide the ovary into 6 pieces. If you look at that one there, you can see I've got the grooves in it, and they're where the stamens are going to go. So up on one side, then turn it over and put that side on your finger, then do the opposite side. I find it easier doing it this way so you get it more even. Then turn it over so your grooves are on both sides, and then divide that into 2. 1, 2. If you don't get them exactly right, don't worry about it. As I keep saying, if anybody ever criticises your work, just say, well, you do it. and then we'll just readjust the bottom part of the anther cap there. One of those grooves is in the wrong place, so I'm just going to redo that one into there. That's it, better. Okay, put that to one side to dry. So now you've got all your components all ready, so we can get on to colouring. So I'm just going to move those out of the way. I'm trying not to make the videos as long as last time, so you can see all the spots. You can always go back and replay the video as many times as you want for each of the points to see how I've done each step. Another thing that I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to make some leaves to go into the spray. I have got a set of rose leaves to put in the spray, but I've made some lily leaves as well. And these are made by using a simple method, using your cutting wheel again. I've done the paste a bit darker this time than I did with the rose leaves in the last video, for the simple reason that lily leaves are a bit darker. So I'm going to roll the paste out. Now if I turn my board over and do it on the other side, like we did with your rose leaves, just to go back to refresh your memory on that, or for anybody that hasn't watched it, this is why we need these boards, to make things a lot easier. So a bit of white vegetable fat onto your board, roll your paste over the groove like that, turn it over so you've got your groove facing upwards, and these I'm going to cut out freehand. You can get cutters for doing this sort of thing, but if you haven't got loads of cutters or you don't want to spend loads of money, then this is the easiest way of doing it. So I'm going to start from the top and bring it down and in, round, down and in, like that. Pull that away, so then you've got a leaf. Now on the other ones I did use a 28 gauge wire on the ones that I've done, but I'm going to use a thicker wire this time, because being a larger leaf, you could probably use a thicker wire. So I'm going to use a 26 gauge wire, which is the same size as the ones that I use for the petals of the lily. And again, I'm going to cut that into 4. Don't matter if they're not exactly the same length, don't worry about it, it doesn't make any difference. Your leaves are going to end up coming out all different sizes anyway when you're cutting them out freehand, so again, don't worry about that, because the way that the leaves grow up the stem, there's a lot of leaves, but we're not going to do all of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the wires, I'm going to put that into the leaf, so again, starting from the bottom, twist it into the bottom and then work it very gradually up the groove. You don't want your wire to be showing anywhere at all, so it wants to be inside the paste. Then that goes onto the pad, and with your ball tool thin the edges of your leaf. Now you can go out and buy loads and loads of different veiners, but unfortunately you end up spending a lot of money, so unless you're doing competition work or you want to be botanically correct, then this is one thing that I use. This is dried corn husk. So if you buy corn, buy it with the husk on it. Take the husks off the corn and put them between some kitchen paper and put them in heavy book and just leave them to dry. And we use these for doing a lot of leaves that have got straight veins going down them, like your spring flowers, like daffodils, tulips, anything like that, for doing things like bamboo or that type of thing. Anything that's got a long leaf like this with straight veins in it. And if you've got 2 pieces, so one underneath, one on top, give it a good press. and then you've got your leaf. So what I'm going to do then is just give it a little bit of a bend so it's not straight, like that, and then just curve that up like that, and then onto your foam like that, and just leave that to dry. I've already got some that are dry here ready. Right, now then, I'm just going to put that in there with that because I've just dropped my bag on the floor, so I need to stop that from drying out. Back onto the other side of my board, and now we're going to start colouring. So I've got all my different components. Just move those wires out of the way. And I've already got some kitchen roll here with some of the colours that I'm going to use today. So, to colour your lily, there's two parts to it. First of all, we need to do the centre part of your petal, and for that I'm using a colour here from Edible Art called Blackcurrant. They've got some wonderful names for their colours. And like I said before, when I'm using brushes, I have certain brushes that I use for certain jobs, and when I find what I've done with it, it should be here somewhere. There it is, hiding under my rolling pin. Right, so what I'm doing, I've already got some colour on here. I don't need a lot on, you don't need loads of colour, so it's a bit onto your brush, off your brush, and then just get your leaf and keep the brush so it's lengthwise down the centre of your petal, and just brush down like that, and then brush out like that from the centre out to the edge, the opposite way to the way I told you with the rose leaves. That's all we need on there, like that. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that to one side, and then I'm going to bring the colour in, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix some of the colour which I've already got in the lid. We don't waste anything here. When you use this, we use isopropyl liquid, which is a form of alcohol. It's a bit like they use in hospitals, but this is for food use. And I've got a little dropper here. You get these from your chemist. Put a drop of the isopropyl into the lid. If it was a full bottle, I'd go straight in, but it's not. Squeeze, so you've got your isopropyl in your dropper, like that. And then I'm just going to put a couple of drops into there, into the colour, that reconstitutes it. And I've got a little brush here somewhere. I'm just going to mix that in like that, so that that's mixed with the liquid. Rather than using a brush, I find that the best method for doing things like dots and that on things, when you want them fine, like the ones I've got on there, the best way is to use a cocktail stick. Probably take you a little bit longer to do it, but you get much finer dots. And I'm not very good at painting, so what I'm going to do is get your sharp end of your cocktail stick into your colour. I'm just going to add a little bit more, because it evaporates very quickly, does this, so get some on there, and then I'm just going to start doing little dots. If you just do one side, and you don't have to worry about where they go, and don't worry about going outside the colour, because they are like that on the flowers. If you want to do anything like this, the best thing to do is to get hold of a real flower if you can. Stargazer lilies are the ones you most commonly see in florist shops. So there's your dots in your lily. The one thing I forgot, when you're doing your lily petals and with your paste, give it a nip at the end, so it's got a bit of a point on it, so you've got that really more of a sharper point on the end. Right, the next step I'm going to do now, as you can see on here, I've got some light green here. This one's called Tropical Lime. I'm just going to put that to one side to dry. So I'm going to go on to my green brush now. And what I'm going to do now is just catch the very tip of the petal like that, and the very base of the petal down there like that, and then turn it over, and then with your brush lengthways, the same as I did with the other colour, then just brush it up the back of the petal like that, so you get a bit of green on the back. Okay, put that to one side, and you do that the same as that on both the wide and the narrow petals. They're both identical, nothing different about either of them. Right, now then, the leaves, I've already got some dried here. I'm using a much darker green for the leaves. So for this I'm using a colour called Rainforest from Edible Art, which is much darker. So a bit of that onto your brush, onto your paper. Let's put the cap on that because I won't need any more. I'm only going to do 3 leaves here. And then brush all over the leaf with that green. The colour that you've coloured your paste with is just basically your base colour. So you think about what colour you're going to dust it with, and if it's a darker colour, then start off with a slightly darker shade background, and then you add your colour, your final colour, with the powder. And these are quite plain leaves, so I'm not doing anything different on these like I did on the rose leaves. We're not messing about with them. You do need to do the back of the leaves as well, because the backs of the leaves, like anything else, are lighter, so you just turn it over and just give it a waft over on the back. And I've just done the soft one there. That's a dry one. You can do it onto the soft petals, but you'd have to reshape them if you were going to do that, as you notice that too. But sometimes you find that when you do it when they're soft, the colour comes, it goes a bit darker because the paste is soft. So just give those a waft over the back like that. Right, so once you've done that, to finish off the colouring, I'm going to come on to the your central column, and again I'm going to go back to the light green again. Now I need some more powder on there, so I'll just get my colour out. This is the Tropical Lime, which is very light. There's 2 different ones actually. They do one called Lime, which is slightly darker, and then there's the Tropical Lime, which is the paler one of the 2. Bit of colour on there, and I'm going to use this for, got some on my leaves there, so I'm going to dust all over the column with this. You could do it a darker colour. In reality they are darker, but sometimes if you do them darker in sugar it looks too much. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the other brush that I used for the black currant, and then on the anther cap just go over the top there like that. So there you are, that's the central column finished. Now then, the stamens that I made, I'm just going to lay those on here. So you've got 6 of these. And again with the lime green, I'm just going to dust all over the stamens with this. You don't need to turn them over, because when you've done one you've got some green on your paper. So if you just put your stamens on the paper and just dust all over it with that.